All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. On behalf of the Environmental Finance Center Network, welcome to our webinar, Navigating the Evolving PFAS Landscape in Biosolids Management. My name is Kristen Crew from the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center. Before we begin, we're going to go over a few logistics and then we can get started. During the webinar today, everyone will be kept on mute to ensure audio quality. If you have a question, please type it into the GoToWebinar question dialog box anytime throughout the session. We will be saving your questions for a facilitated Q&A session at the end of the presentation. After the webinar, you will receive a follow-up email that includes a link to the recording and other information that you may need. You can also download the slides from today in the Handouts tab in your GoToWebinar control panel. This webinar has not been submitted for pre-approval of continuing education credits, but eligible attendees will receive a certificate of attendance for their personal record. To receive a certificate for the session, you must attend for the entire session and register and attend individually using your real name and unique email address. Certificates will be sent via email within 30 days of the webinar date. If you have questions or if you need assistance, please contact smallsystems@syr.edu. Now for a little bit about us. The Environmental Finance Center Network provides training and technical assistance to small water and wastewater systems in all U.S. states and territories through our building technical, managerial, and finance capacity programs. If your community or utility needs assistance with drinking water or wastewater system management, please feel free to contact us through our request form, which I will be sharing shortly in the chat. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. I am very excited to introduce today's presenter, Mary Baker. Mary is the Executive Director at the Mid-Atlantic Biosolids Association. We are so pleased to have her on with us today. Welcome, Mary, and I will go ahead and hand it over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, EFCN, for this opportunity, and thank you all for attending. I am Mary Baker. I'm the Executive Director of the Mid-Atlantic Biosolids Association, or MABA. MABA is a nonprofit devoted to communicating the benefits of resource recovery within the biosolids community and the communities that we serve. Today, I will be providing you with some information and updates and some background on PFAS and biosolids from a regulatory, legislative, and research perspective. So PFAS, a word representing a group of things that none of us can avoid or escape right now. And as I was putting together this presentation, I couldn't help but thinking of an old Saturday Night Live or SNL skit and a character. And the skit was Coffee Talk with Linda Richmond. I'm not sure if anyone remembers Linda and Coffee Talk, but Linda had a Yiddish sounding word she used when she got overwhelmed by something, and that word was verklempt. So when Linda felt verklempt, she'd say something like, talk amongst yourselves. And she'd say a silly oxymoronic statement like, chickpeas are neither chicks nor peas. Discuss. So for this presentation, I think that Linda might say something like, talk amongst yourselves. Super funds are neither super nor much of a fund. Discuss. So let's take a look at what the EPA knows so far about PFAS and some of the things that we'll discuss to hopefully feel a little less verklempt. So we're going to have our first poll now, just to check in and see if PFAS has you feeling verklempt.
Yes, are you feeling verklempt? And the options are yes, totally verklempt, a little verklempt, but I'm hanging in there, or not at all, I'm feeling cool as butter. All right, it looks like most people have voted. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll in just a couple seconds. All right, closing the poll now. And Mary, an overwhelming 60% said a little verklempt, but I'm hanging in there. We have 26% saying yes, totally verklempt, and 15% saying not at all, I'm feeling cool as butter.
All right, good to know. Well, hopefully we'll be working on getting that verklempt feeling down as we go through. So let's start with what the EPA has learned so far. And this is directly from the EPA website. What we know about PFAS. PFAS are widely used, long-lasting chemicals, components of which break down very slowly over time. Because of their widespread use and their persistence in the environment, many PFAS are found in the blood of people and animals all over the world and are present at low levels in a variety of food products and in the environment. PFAS are found in water, air, fish, and soil at locations across the nation and the globe. Scientific studies have shown that exposure to some PFAS in the environment may be linked to harmful health effects in humans and animals. And there are thousands of PFAS chemicals, and they are found in many different consumer, commercial, and industrial products. This makes it challenging to study and to assess the potential human health and environmental risks. So now let's go over some of the things that I'll discuss today. For today's discussion, I'll review things from about PFAS and biosolids from 3 different aspects. From the regulatory perspective, we'll take a look at the EPA PFAS Strategic Roadmap, highlighted here, the finalized risk assessment for PFOA and PFOS in biosolids, which is expected in winter 2024. Also from a regulatory perspective, the EPA designation of PFOA and PFOS as CERCLA hazardous substances. This was finalized in April of 2024. From a legislative perspective, I'll talk about the Senate EPW, or Environment and Public Works Committee, and other legislative updates and developments. And from the research perspective, I will significantly highlight the National Collaborative PFAS study that is being led by Dr. Ian Pepper at the University of Arizona. So our first topic is the US EPA PFAS Strategic Roadmap. In April of 2021, the EPA created the EPA Council on PFAS. This Council on PFAS was made up of senior technical and policy leaders from across EPA program offices and regions. And that council developed the strategic roadmap to lay out EPA's whole of agency approach on PFAS and to set timelines. You might be familiar with some of the aspects or items on the strategic roadmap, particularly some that have already occurred. And one such item is highlighted here. In April of 2024, the EPA announced the final National Primary Drinking Water Regulation, or NPDWR, for 6 PFAS. And with this, EPA established legally enforceable levels called maximum contaminant levels, or MCLs. Notably for PFOA and PFOS, those were set at 4 parts per trillion. Along with this final rule, there are some requirements. The first of which, public water systems must monitor for these PFAS and have 3 years to complete that initial monitoring, so by 2027, followed by ongoing compliance monitoring. Water systems must provide the public with information on the levels of these PFAS in the drinking water beginning in 2027. Also, public water systems have 5 years, so by 2029, to implement solutions to reduce these PFAS if monitoring shows that the drinking water level exceeds these MCLs. And again, in 2029, public water systems that have PFAS in drinking water, which violates 1 or more of these MCLs, must take action to reduce levels of these PFAS in their drinking water. And they must provide notification to the public of the violation. The final item scheduled on the strategic roadmap And the area that MABA focuses on is the finalized risk assessment for PFOA and PFOS in biosolids. This is scheduled for winter of 2024. And we know that it has gone through internal review and is now in external review. We also know that it will be a sizable document, around or over 400 pages. And we know that there will be a 45-day public comment window after the draft risk assessment is published. So here I have some additional information from the EPA website. You'll see the graphic on the side, and this is the generalized risk assessment framework. Also linked here is the risk assessment of pollutants in biosolids webpage on EPA website. So what does EPA mean by risk? The EPA considers risk to be the chance of harmful effects to human health or to ecological systems resulting from exposure to an environmental stressor. A stressor is any physical, chemical, or biological entity that can induce an adverse response. EPA uses risk assessments to characterize the nature and magnitude of health risks to humans and ecological receptors from chemical contaminants and other stressors. So what happens after the risk assessment? It's important to differentiate between risk assessment and risk management. So again, from the EPA's website, this details risk management. And in case it's too small, and because it is such a crucial piece, I will read this directly. Risk management is a distinctly different process from risk assessment. Risk assessment establishes if a risk is present, and if so, the range or magnitude of that risk. In the risk management process, the results of the risk assessment are integrated with other considerations, such as economic or legal concerns, to reach decisions regarding the need for and practicability of implementing risk reduction activities. So this is very important to keep in mind. When the EPA risk assessment for biosolids is released, that will not be the end of the discussion, but the beginning of the path toward determining what can and should happen next for each individual community and region. So what can be done for now for states, regions, and their POTWs or WRFs while we await that risk assessment? The EPA has provided recommendations. This memo linked here and available in my slides was part of the NPDES or NPDES permitting and PFAS assessment requirement in that permitting. It states, states may work with their POTWs to reduce the amount of PFAS chemicals in biosolids by use of method 1633 to analyze biosolids. And where this analysis indicates presence of PFAS from industrial sources, take actions to reduce PFAS discharges and validate PFAS reductions with regular monitoring. Some states have already started their own PFAS and biosolids programs, and they have a degree of similarity and echo these suggestions. You may be familiar with Michigan, New York, and most recently Maryland. So to summarize, it is important for POTWs or WRFs to have a basic understanding of where they are relative to PFAS in their biosolids. With that knowledge, if they identify sources of PFAS, to be able to plan to or to begin to reduce them. So we have another poll, just a temperature check. Are we feeling any less verklempt?
All right, the poll is launched and the options are yes, feeling better, or a little less verklempt, still verklempt but hopeful, nope, still verklempt. And I'll give everyone about 10 more seconds to get your answers in for this poll. All right, closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. All right, Mary, so we got a mixed bag of emotions. 34% of people are saying still verklempt but hopeful, and another 34% are saying a little less verklempt, which is good. We also have 18% saying that they're feeling better, And unfortunately, 14% are still saying that they're feeling verklempt still.
All right, well, hopefully this will improve as we go. So let's move on to where regulatory and legislative intercept, CERCLA or Superfund. So what is Superfund? In response to the identification of toxic waste dumps in the 1970s and the national attention when the public learned about the risks to human health and the environment from these contaminated sites, in 1980, Congress established the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, or CERCLA. CERCLA is informally referred to as Superfund. It's intended to allow the EPA to clean up contaminated sites. It's also intended to force the parties responsible for the contamination to either perform the cleanup or reimburse the government for EPA-led cleanup. You might have heard of the polluter pays principle, and at different times there have been actual taxes for some companies under this name. So let's bring it back to water, wastewater, and biosolids. In April of 2024, the EPA finalized the designation of PFOA and PFOS as CERCLA hazardous substances. The rule requires entities to report releases of PFOA and PFOS that meet or exceed the reportable quantity. Additionally, the EPA issued the PFAS Enforcement Discretion and Settlement Policy that they state makes clear that EPA will focus enforcement on parties who have significantly contributed to release of PFAS into the environment. For example, manufacturers of or manufacturers using PFAS. So what does that mean for POTWs or WRFs and the biosolids community? In a quick review of the rule, MABA notes that it requires an entity that releases more than 1 pound per day to notify EPA within 24 hours. What this translates to in biosolids with a 20 part per billion concentration of PFOS or PFOA, it would take 25,000 dry tons to be applied in a 24-hour period. Thus, we do not see it as a large reporting issue. However, it is yet to be determined if the rule will require monitoring to determine discharge amounts, and if so, the extent of what must be monitored and at what frequency. Additionally, as it relates to the CERCLA discretionary policy, the policy states the EPA does not intend to pursue, based on equitable factors, PFAS response actions or costs under CERCLA against community water systems and POTWs, municipal separate storm sewer systems, and farms that apply biosolids to land. However, this does not preclude other parties from seeking an action again under CERCLA against these same groups or passive receivers. And it does not preclude other parties from seeking action against the EPA. So let's talk about CERCLA from a legislative perspective. The Senate EPW, or Environment and Public Works Committee, began work on bipartisan legislation to mitigate and remediate PFAS contamination. Draft legislation was introduced in June 2023 and is linked here. A group, including MABA, representing passive receivers, sent a letter emphasizing the need for protection for passive receivers from the potential financial impacts of this designation in 2023 and again in 2024. There's a graphic here on the side of that letter. And the message from the passive receivers is being heard and considered. In September 2023, Senator Shelley Moore Capito opened a hearing with a statement in support of protection for passive receivers. That's linked here as well. In March 2024, a hearing of the EPW Committee was held to discuss policy considerations, including the potential legal and financial impacts to municipalities and POTWs, also linked here. And in other legislation, HR 7944, the Water Systems PFAS Liability Protection Act, was introduced in April 2024 to exempt certain entities under CERCLA, including water and wastewater treatment facilities. And that legislation currently has bipartisan support and co-sponsorship. So what can be done by POTWs or worse in the community? The answer is outreach, and that outreach is really twofold. The Senate EPW and all legislators can still provide an exemption and protection for passive receivers regarding CERCLA. They need to hear from their constituents to explain the meaning and importance of the polluter pays principle. I've linked here to the contact main website for the U.S. Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works, as well as a tool to help you find your members in the U.S. Congress. If you're interested in reaching out to the Senate EPW or other legislators and would like to discuss more or have a copy of the letter that was sent by others in MABA, please reach out. I would be happy to share that and discuss it with you further. The other crucial, important aspect for outreach is regarding the introduction of these chemicals into the environment, really putting an end to PFAS at the beginning of the cycle. This can take place on a national and state level, and there are pieces of legislation that have been introduced and some that have passed to ban PFAS from production and from being sold. I reference here PA 2238, and this was a piece of legislation in Pennsylvania that supports a consumer product PFAS chemical ban. MABA did share a positive support response letter, and that graphic is here. If you would like to discuss this further, review MABA's support letter of such legislation, including this one, please reach out. I'd be happy to share that with you. Okay, so we've talked about PFAS and biosolids from a regulatory and legislative perspective. Another poll, another room check. Are we feeling any less verklempt?
All right, poll is launched. And go ahead and get your feelings in. I'll be closing the poll in just a couple seconds. All right, closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. All right, Mary, we're making progress here. So only 9% said nope, still feeling verklempt. And the majority, 42%, are saying they're feeling a little less verklempt.
That's excellent. All right, good to hear. And hopefully the next and final piece we discuss will help even more. That aspect is research. So I'd like to share some information on research on PFAS and biosolids, and the study that I will highlight the most for this presentation is that of the National Collaborative PFAS Study. The study is being conducted by Dr. Ian Pepper and his team and colleagues at the University of Arizona, and it began in late 2022. The objective of this research is to evaluate whether or not land application of biosolids is a significant public health route of exposure to PFAS. You'll see on this map where samples have been collected. There are soil samples at land applications, sites, and controls at 23 sites within 17 states. Within the MABA region, the states included are Pennsylvania, Virginia, and New Jersey. In the first phase of the study, the team worked to determine the incidence of PFAS in soil, mobility and leaching, and PFAS in groundwater. And soil was taken at depths of 1, 3, and 6 feet. So what have they learned so far? 14 of the 23 sites have been analyzed to date. You'll see on this table, and this was a part of the July 2024 study update, the median concentrations of PFAS analytes in low and high biosolids plots are remarkably low, and all less than 0.5 parts per billion. The value for corresponding control plots are even lower, However, it is notable that these compounds are detected in control plots with no biosolids and no obvious source of PFAS contamination. Another interesting piece that has been learned so far in the study is that there is rapid attenuation or decrease of PFAS shown to occur within 0 to 3 feet of soil depth, and additionally from 3 to 6 feet. The hope of Dr. Pepper and his team and colleagues is to continue into a second phase of the study to develop a similar national network of plant uptake data by analyzing PFAS in crops grown on the land application plots already studied. The study is currently seeking interest and funding in order to proceed into phase 2. So I'd like to just note one other study in place. There are many others, and I'd be happy to share that information. Feel free to reach out to me for that. Highlighted here is the WRF Unregulated Organic Chemicals and Biosolids Project 5125. I'd also like to share some work done by one of MABA's volunteer groups, and that's the MABA PFAS Focus Group. They are working to create an extensive data set of anonymous PFAS test results for the region. And this data set is available to MABA members as a tool to allow POTWs or WRFs to have a better perspective of how their PFAS results compare to those results of other facilities in the region. MABA also has additional information, research, studies, presentations, etc. available on our PFAS section of our website. We also have the option to submit your contact information and opt in for new research opportunities. And MABA has worked to create a sister organization, the Mid-Atlantic Biosolids Foundation. That organization's mission is to advance sustainable solutions in the management of biosolids and cultivate public understanding and acceptance through education, research, and collaboration, fostering environmental stewardship and public health across the Mid-Atlantic. So why is this research important and why should it be supported? Again, we have a twofold response to this. The POTWs and biosolids community should strive to be engaging in research about the current state of PFAS and biosolids and in soil from land application, and whatever current and future destruction and remediation options are available. A proactive approach to provide the best possible outcome is paramount. To know what we're working with and what the options are, as well as important logistics like timing and costs. Secondly, we need to remember the next steps in the work with the EPA as it relates to risk assessment and risk management. The National PFAS Study will be a national set of real-world data with research methodology that is identical for each site, allowing for direct comparison of data. It will provide quantitative data for risk management at specific sites. And this data is from municipal biosolids, not industrially contaminated biosolids. So one final poll, one final room check. Are we feeling less verklempt?
All right, that poll is launched. And just a reminder to submit any questions that you do have while we have Mary here with us. If you are feeling verklempt and maybe there's a question or some clarity that you could find, go ahead and drop your question in the questions tab in your control panel. All right, closing the poll in just a couple seconds. All right. All right, we have definitely made progress, Mary. So we have only 6% of people still feeling completely verklempt, while 51% are feeling somewhat, but more hopeful, and 43% are feeling much less verklempt.
That's excellent. All right, I'm glad to hear that. That does conclude my presentation. I hope that you found it informative. I hope that you will leave it feeling a little less verklempt and a lot more empowered to discuss. And eventually, as Linda would say, maybe we'll think of PFAS and think, no big whoop. So I invite you to check out the MABA website. It's www.mabiosolids.org. I've circled here on the screen that is on our homepage where you will want to press to check out the PFAS resources that we have available. We have a wealth of information there. And I encourage you to reach out to me by phone or email, both of those here. I'd be happy to talk more, and I hope that you might want to get involved with our organization or an organization in your region. Thank you very much again for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mary. So we did have a couple of questions that came in. The first question, it might be something that we can see if we can adjust the slides maybe and share in the follow-up, but this person is asking if the results can be shared in the same units that the regulations are in.
From Dr. Peppers?
Yes, I think that this is what they're referring to.
Well, it depends on where they're speaking of where they're being regulated. The EPA has not released a risk assessment, and so they have not put out any regulation, although method 1633 uses parts per billion. So that would be what we're relating to here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And next question, should lagoon biosolids be analyzed for PFOS before excavation?
That is an interesting question. Let me look into that. If I can have the contact information for the person who shared that question. Okay.
Yeah, I will, any questions that we can't address today, I will make sure that Mary gets access to them and she has time to answer them, and I will send them in the follow-up email to each of you. And next question, PFAS results in biosolids is only a fraction of all PFAS, correct? And it doesn't include any precursors. So yeah, sorry, I'm reading the question as I'm processing it as I'm reading it. So the results from the biosolids is only a fraction, and it doesn't include any potential precursors, correct?
It's testing for what the method is able to test for. So, and each test has its framework of what specifically is being tested. I understand, yeah, precursors potentially are not included within.
Perfect, thank you. And next question, what about crop uptake of PFAS?
Right, and that is where Dr. Pepper's study, as well as several others that have been conducted, there is information that I can supply if folks would like some information on what has been done so far and what has been learned so far in crop uptake. It depends upon the type of crop, and then it's the different parts of the crop that take it up in different ways.
Awesome, thank you. Next question, can PFAS have impacts on land application of biosolids?
Can you reread that? I'm not sure that I understand.
Can PFAS have impacts on land application of the biosolids?
It can have impacts depending upon the regulations. In some states like New York, for instance, there are actionable levels that they've determined where they want to work with the POTW to determine if there's an industrial source, because the levels indicate that there may be. And so some action is to look into those, while other action is to halt land application until those sources can be identified. In Maryland, there's a reduction of land application based on the amount of PFAS found within.
Great, thank you. Next comment and question, and we do have quite a lot coming in, so again, if we're not able to address them, then we will get back to you in the follow-up email with any of these questions. Next one, still learning about PFAS, but I see mention of legislation for public work systems, specifically drinking water. Is there legislation in the works for wastewater facilities and industrial facilities, or is that tied with reducing PFAS at the production level?
Well, that's kind of two questions kind of in one. So the legislation here in Pennsylvania is the start of the cycle, where the PFAS is either manufactured and created, or there's a manufacturing process that uses PFAS. So that is the elimination of that occurring like before it happens, or you know, a state saying we will not accept these products within our state. So that has happened in other states and is something that can be done. And then when it comes to protection for water and wastewater, this HR 7944 is actually protecting water and wastewater. So that is the type of legislation that seeks to protect, sort of, if you're thinking of it as a cycle, as a circle, at the end of that cycle, where what we call folks at the water and wastewater treatment facilities are passive receivers after those chemicals have been introduced and have gone through the environment and then end up at the water and wastewater treatment facilities.
Thank you for that explanation. And next question, what approximate, or do you know what approximate percentage of biosolids are generated by wastewater treatment plants?
I would need to look into that. That's a big, but there is biosolidsdata.org, I believe is the website. So that does provide a lot of information, and but specific questions, I would say if you have a specific question about a specific area, I could look into that for you. But biosolidsdata.org is definitely a great resource. It's the National Biosolids Data Project.
Perfect, thank you. Next question, is a municipal landfill a passive receiver?
Yes, and there are groups representing waste landfills and whatnot within those groups that have also joined MABA in the responses and support letters.
All right, and next question. Has the association reviewed biosolid data from the North Carolina State University researchers from going back to 2017? There have been concerns on potential migration into sensitive water bodies.
I am personally not familiar with that research, although my colleagues may be. So I would invite whomever shared that comment to please reach out to me by email and share that with me.
All right. Next question, if there are low concentrations in soils within 3 to 6 feet, should there be concerns for leaching into the groundwater?
That is a specific question that I would likely refer to Dr. Pepper, and Mark Russo, I believe, is his colleague who is specifically focusing on the groundwater aspect of that research. But I'd be happy to share the update that does include some information about the groundwater, and point you in Dr. Pepper's direction.
Awesome, thank you, Mary. And next question, were soil samples for the study processed to evaluate total oxidizable precursors and total organic fluorine? This would identify precursors and smaller PFAS not detectable by 1633.
That would be a very specific research question for Dr. Pepper. I can, but I'd like to have the question exactly verbatim so that I can share that with him and get a response. Yeah.
Yes, I will organize those and send them over to you. And as I had said, I'll send that in a follow-up email to each of you. Next one is a comment. They said, I am a licensed drone operator that plans to follow the Michigan model of detecting PFAS in surface waters by using a thermal drone for CERCLA soon. And next we have a question. Will PFAS regulation regarding biosolids, will PFAS regulations regarding biosolids, if past or current exposure under existing CERCLA or RCRA regulations affect biosolids derived fertilizers that are distributed in compliance with state fertilizer licensing programs?
That is very tricky. I'm not sure on that. Yeah, and that would be something that I probably would need to take to an attorney to see about that.
All right, and next question. The EPA risk assessment on biosolids is for PFAS, PFOA, and PFOS that are already banned. Do you think that we will have to deal with more recent chemicals like Gen X in terms of biosolids and regulations down the road?
I would say that there seems to be some likelihood that that could be the case, which would only further support the ban of as many of these types of chemicals as possible from production and introduction into the environment altogether.
Great, thank you. Next question, do you have any comments on the technology to treat PFAS and the estimated cost per million gallons?
I think that, the biosolids community and the communities that support the scientific and engineering communities that support the biosolids community are working feverishly and incredibly well to try to put together as many remediation and destruction technologies as possible. And we certainly have a lot of information and webinars that we've hosted ourselves that I'd be happy to share on those. There is a document from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency that MABA member Hazen and Sawyer worked on to help put together that does detail some cost estimates, and I'd be happy to share that with folks. I can provide a link.
Great, thank you. Yes, if you can share that with me, I will make sure that we send that out in a follow-up email. And next question, PFOA and PFOS are long-chain PFAS and have an affinity to solids. This is more opinion, I guess, should we be bounding these compounds in the solids as a risk mitigation measure?
Yeah, that's a very technical question. So I would say that that would be a question that I hope the person may have interest in joining the PFAS focus group, or looking at research and discussion with the newly created Mid-Atlantic Biosolids Foundation. I would welcome that discussion. I'm sure many of the folks on that group would.
Wonderful. And next question, did MABA prepare a response to the New York Times article regarding a farm contaminated by PFAS contaminated sludge applied many years ago, which has contaminated their dairy cows in Maine?
No, MABA did not prepare or send a formal response to that article. We did, though, in the week that followed it, we issued a national communication guidance document on PFAS and biosolids management. MABA worked with 6 other regional organizations, biosolid organizations across the country, to create that document and share it with our members for them to use to share with the communities they serve. And I'd be happy to share a link to that document as well.
Great, thank you, Mary. Next, are there specialized landfill sites for disposing of sludge or biosolids with high concentration of PFAS detected in them? Asking for states with existing regulations for PFAS containing biosolids, which can't be used for land applications.
No, there are not.
All right. And the last question, last question so far, how do we ensure that land application of biosolids remains a beneficial recycling option for municipal sludge, considering we are having passive generators?
Right. Well, I think that's where the very proactive piece, getting ahead of things as much as we possibly can at this point, is really paramount. There needs to be the stop of these chemicals from being introduced into the environment so that we can ensure that the rich history of biosolids land application can continue into the future and promote a circular economy.
Awesome. And there was a question we had earlier. Someone had asked if there was any requirement to report to the wastewater treatment facility, and I asked for some clarity. And they said, she had said that there was a requirement to report to the EPA. I was just wondering if there was any requirement to report to the wastewater treatment facility receiving wastewater that it may have PFAS.
Oh, okay, that was regarding CERCLA. So that is, I would have to see how that is laid out because I was using terminology that was reporting for land application of biosolids with a certain concentration of PFOS or PFOA. So I would have to look into what concentration of each of those would be with the flow of the treatment plant, what would constitute a pound, because that is the reporting requirement. So I would have to find out how that translates for those facilities.
Wonderful, thank you, Mary. And then I also received the question regarding if this webinar is recorded. Yes, it is being recorded. And in the same follow-up email that I had been mentioning, there will be a link to this recording or the recording of this webinar in that follow-up email. And I don't see any more questions. If you do have any questions, go ahead and get them in. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you, Mary, for sharing your expertise with us today. Following this webinar, as I mentioned, each of you will receive a follow-up email with the slides from today and with the link to the recording. We ask that you please complete the webinar evaluation following this webinar so you can let us know your thoughts on today's session, as this helps us plan future webinars on topics that are important to you. Thank you again, and we hope to see you at future EFC and events. Thank you, Mary. Was there anything else that you wanted to say while closing out?
No, I greatly appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to receiving some of these questions and information so that I can get them to the right experts to be answered. But this was a great opportunity, and I thank you all for attending.
Thank you. And I received one more comment. Please consider sending an abstract for the 2025 Arizona Water Conference. It'll be in April in Phoenix. So
Great,
someone would
thank
like
you.
to see more of you.
Great,
All
thank
right.
you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope everyone has a good day.